Welcome back, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Today we'll be reacting to the Tower of London, the reconstruction of 1,000 years of history. This one's specifically fun to me since I've been there. I was at the London Tower a couple months ago, and it is just amazing, beautiful. If you have the chance to go, I recommend you to go. That's what we do here today. That's what we do every day at the We Project. We learn. So I'm ready to learn. Are you ready to learn? Let's jump in.
Standing tall for nearly 1,000 years, the Tower of London is a symbol of Britain's
I'm going to turn closed captions off.
tumultuous history. From royal palaces to grim prisons, this fortress has seen it all. This is not just history, this is history brought to life. Welcome to the Tower of London.
Here we go. And I'm guessing they're picking the 1066 date from the Norman invasion. A lot of people use that as like a line in the sand between pre-Norman invasion to post-Norman invasion when William the Conqueror took over. So I'm sure I'm gonna hit on that.
Our story begins long before 1066, with the Romans who ruled Britain from 43 to 410 AD. By the early 2nd century, London already had a forum, a vast basilica, an amphitheatre, public baths, and a massive defensive wall. Little did they know, this wall would shape the future of the Tower of London.
And there's a piece of it, you can find some places of the original Roman wall if you know where to go.
After the Romans withdrew in 410 AD, Saxon rulers took over. The walled area soon was given over to farming or abandoned. London faded as a major population centre, but under King Alfred in the 9th century, it was reborn.
Are you 50? Think? The Norman Castle.
The foundation of the Tower of London was a direct result of the Norman conquest of 1066. After his victory at Hastings, King William realised that London, at the heart of the country, had to be secured. Construction of an early fortification began as soon as King William entered the city of London. The site was chosen next to an old Saxon church, St. Peter's, and within eastern corner of the old Roman wall. Initially, a timber tower with an earth rampart was constructed. A moat was dug, and subsequently a wooden palisade was erected to the west and north, with Roman walls to the east and the River Thames to the south. But soon the works on the White Tower was to be started.
And the White Tower, of course, is that prominent tower that you see in the middle of everything if you see it today. And this is how old it is. And if you go, I know we're just so close in the video, but if you go to the site, you can actually, I believe there's a floor window, so like a glass floor window that you can look inside and see the remnants of what once was, which is right here 1,000 years ago. In 70.
William and his heirs intended their mighty castle not only to dominate the skyline, but also the hearts and minds of the defeated Londoners. The White Tower is a keep, often the strongest structure in a medieval castle, containing lodgings suitable for the lord. Its thick walls house latrines and fireplaces, and at its heart, St. John's Chapel offered a spiritual refuge for the royal family.
Yeah, this church is, I'm not sure if this is the exact same church that's there now, but a similar one is.
The White Tower was probably completed by 1100 at the latest. It has 4 corner towers. The structure was originally 3 stories high, comprising of a basement floor, an entrance level, and an upper floor.
Massive.
Limited records indicate that the first expansion of the Tower of London happened during Henry I's reign in the early 12th century. A 4 building was added to the south side of the tower to provide extra defences to the entrance.
That's the entrance, exactly.
By the late 12th century, the old Roman fortifications were dismantled and replaced with new inner courtyard walls. Wardrobe Tower was constructed for the king's private use, incorporating the old Roman tower.
So it's been around for 104 years or something like that.
Richard the Lionheart's reign saw a series of large improvements to the Tower of London. The moat was expanded to the west, connecting with the River Thames.
Wow.
Meanwhile, the wooden palisade was replaced by new stone walls, creating what was later to be known as the innermost ward. It was filled with various royal lodgings. One of such was a great hall which existed in the south of the ward. It was similar to, although slightly smaller than, the one at Winchester Castle.
Which I believe Winchester was the old capital, if I'm not mistaken.
Richard's expansion effectively doubled the castle's size when stone walls around the newly created inner ward were finally completed by the end of the 12th century. Bell Tower dates from around that time and is the second oldest tower surviving to this day.
Wow. Besides the White Tower, of course. You can see the hole in the wall. I believe that's where Trader's Gate is located. I think in that area. That little front area that's not, there's no wall there. Okay, so now we're in 1200 to 1485.
At the beginning of the 13th century, the City of London's population reached 30,000. The old St Paul's Cathedral was nearing completion, being the longest church in the world at the time.
Notice he said old St. Paul's Cathedral since it was, I believe, burned down at one point.
The Old London Bridge was a key crossing point of the Thames in London, ferrying...
And it would, I'm sorry for pausing so much, it's just so fun to talk about this. It's so crazy that we also have a London Bridge video, but that we reacted to. But this bridge right here, at peak times, at this time in England right here, at peak times, it would take you nearly 60 minutes to cross that bridge. So if you're in traffic, just know it's been 800 years of traffic.
People, goods, and livestock across the river. The Tower of London, previously extended during Richard the Lionheart's reign, was London's main defence point. King Henry III was eager to ensure that the Tower of London was a formidable fortification, while at the same time a comfortable place to live.
Yeah.
The new work began in the 1220s with the construction of 3 new towers: Wakefield Tower, Lanthorn Tower, and Bloody Tower.
Bloody Tower. Was Bloody Tower the original tower? I think that's just the name of it that we're given today, given the circumstances that will arise.
Probably served as private residences for the Queen and King respectively. Most of the early works focused on the palatial buildings of the innermost ward, including the renovated Great Hall. In the late 1230s, however, the king's attention turned once again to the castle's defences. Cold Harbour Gate was erected and the old ditch was filled in to make way for a new expansion. Beginning around 1238, the castle was expanded to the east, north and northwest.
More space.
The tradition of whitewashing the White Tower, from which it derives its name, began in 1240, a popular fashion at the time.
Yep. That's why it's called the White Tower.
Henry's building programme wasn't popular amongst the locals, so they promptly rejoiced later that same year when the old gatehouse collapsed. It did not hinder the castle expansion, however, which included a new defensive perimeter studded with towers.
Smart.
The work continued throughout the reign of Henry III and into Edward I, although it was occasionally interrupted by civil unrest.
Very formidable, right? As he said, like this also took like the eyes and hearts of the people that were quote unquote just conquered by William in about 200 years prior. Like, can you imagine living like this? Is like the for two things here. So one, this is like the icon of London at this point. Besides, there's a bridge, but to the people that live there, this is the epicenter, not like of where people congregate, but the epicenter of what is their icon as a city. And as well as number two, this is where the monarch lived. We think of Buckingham Palace, uh, places that are crazy different in terms of like how it looks, how spectacle it is. This was an actual castle.
Finally, a wide moat was dug around the new inner ward walls.
Dang, that is just a huge moat, especially if we compare this moat to the one in 1070. It's like 3 or 4 times big.
Throughout the history, the tower has been adapted and developed to defend and control the nation. High-profile prisoners, including queens and conspirators, saw their final days within its walls.
And I think when he says queens, he's thinking mainly of Henry VIII, right? I think that's right.
Although he was rarely in London, Edward commissioned an expensive remodelling of the tower, costing £21,000 between 1275 and 1285, over double that spent on the castle during the whole of Henry's reign. He extended the south side wall onto the land that had previously been submerged by the River Thames. In this wall, he built St Thomas's Tower, later known as Traitor's Gate.
Right. Beautiful. Bang.
A new entrance to the tower was built. New gates named Bywood Tower and Middle Tower. A bridge, a barbican were also added.
And I just love how there's just continuous expansion. Like, no one's resting in their laurels here. They're just continuously upgrading.
By the end of Edward's reign, he had not only completed Henry's works, but also brought the last major permanent transformation to the castle layout.
Last permanent. Interesting.
He created a new outer ward and second curtain walls surrounding the castle. The tower became the safest place in all of England at the time.
Oh, yeah.
4 additional towers were added: Legs Mount, Breast Mount, Devlin Tower and Well Tower. Even to this day, most of Henry and Edward's structures are still standing, and the tower had remained with a similar footprint thereafter.
You gotta imagine as much conflict that Europe has had over the last 200 years at this time, that this was such a precaution and such a worry for these monarchs to and whomever was prominent here, to have a safe and as structurally integral, like a very, I can't even find the words, but beautiful.
A royal menagerie was placed in the Lion Tower by the entrance, housing a variety of exotic animals gifted to the king, rumoured to include lions, elephants and even polar bears.
Yeah, crazy.
The old Norman chapel was renovated as part of Edward's work too. In addition to being a defensive structure, the tower was the most important royal prison in the country. Another institution that saw a permanent establishment within the tower was the Royal Mint, housed in the new outer ward until the 19th century.
I didn't know that.
Edward III ordered renovations to the castle, and in 1375 a wharf in front of the tower allowed ships to dock next to the fortress.
That's still here today.
And the second watergate, named Cradle Tower, was constructed to the east of St Thomas's Tower, used exclusively by the king. By the end of the 14th century, the area within the walls was filled with various buildings, including forges, warehouses and armories. Some viewed it as a separate city supporting the king's magnificence.
Now, I know we're only at 1375, 1400 here, but I'm thinking, like, is this the peak of when this castle was used? Because obviously there was some transition. in the next couple hundred years, 1400 to 1600. There's a lot of transitioning is about to happen. So like I'm wondering, is this the peak of use right here in this time? I know Edward didn't get too much use out of it. But I'm thinking like I said, as like a bustling little village.
Much of the latter half of the 15th century was occupied by the Wars of the Roses between the claimants to the throne,
Yep.
the houses of Lancaster and York. During the wars, the tower was damaged by artillery. In response, the tower was then fortified to withstand gunfire, and loopholes were carved out for cannons and handguns.
They ain't messing around now.
Additionally, near the entrance, an enclosure called the bulwark was created for this same purpose.
Like if you want to get to that, because obviously there's no way to fly into this area. This is way before all that. There is really no way to get to that keep without a barrage. You'd have to have an army unformidable. By the time you get there, though, they're probably already escaped. But there's just no way to get to this keep. You'd have to have like a heist with A-list movie actors to be able to get to this keep. I wonder if anyone ever snuck into the
After
keep.
200 years of painstaking reconstruction, the tower was rendered obsolete with the invention and popularisation of gunpowder, remaining mostly unchanged and standing as a monument to Edward and Henry's reigns.
Wait, what did he say?
The tower was rendered After 200 years of painstaking reconstruction, the tower was rendered obsolete with the invention and popularisation of gunpowder.
Why? Why would that make it obsolete? Because of gunpowder. I'm not following.
Remaining mostly unchanged and standing as a monument to Edward and Henry's reigns.
Decline. So we were at the peak. Okay, so the Tudor. This is going to get us into the Henry VIII.
Beginning from the Tudor period, the Tower of London was in fact relatively little used as a residence by the sovereign. Nevertheless, some attempts to improve the palace buildings were made. Henry VII added a new gallery and a new garden between 1501 and 1506. These works created a second court to the east, with a new gallery intersecting the gardens in the fashionable continental style.
I wonder when they're going to add the ravens.
The royal chapel was destroyed by fire in 1512 and rebuilt shortly after. It is best known as the burial place of some of the most famous prisoners of the tower, including 3 queens, namely Anne Boleyn, Catherine Howard and Lady Jane Grey. In 1530, the White Tower's corner turrets received their iconic onion-shaped dome roofs.
Very popular.
In the southwestern corner of the inner ward, the Queen's house was built by King Henry VIII, probably for Queen Anne Boleyn, but she lived there only as a prisoner for 18 days, awaiting her execution.
She lived there only as a prisoner. That is so impressive. Henry VIII, no matter what your opinion is on him, he went crazy at the end of his life.
During the reign of King James I, it was converted into a mint. Later, it became a storage space for the crown jewels and the role it still serves today.
Yep.
Historic plans of the Tower of London also show a building at the site next to the Queen's House. It was used at the time as a guardhouse and a private place for executions of high-born prisoners. By 1540s, medieval storages were in perilous state, and therefore a dedicated storehouse was ordered to be constructed.
Storages.
The ordnance storehouse built in 1545 was one of the largest structures within the castle,
Like for grain and stuff?
spanning across the full width of the inner ward and north of the White Tower.
That's a nice map.
After King Henry VIII's death, up until the 19th century, English monarchs stayed at the tower no more than a few days. The Office of Ordnance and the Office of Armoury, which oversaw the tower's function as an arsenal and a stronghold, became the most influential occupants of the castle.
Okay. But not a lot happening. The arsenal days. Yeah, this is a blind spot for me. I'm not sure much about what's going on in the 17th to 19th century. This is a great video, by the way. I'll put the link in the description for the full video.
By the middle of the 17th century, most of the royal lodgings were abandoned. In 1639, the medieval Great Hall was converted into storage for guns, carriages, and other equipment. Other buildings were also adapted, as the need for storing gunpowder was ever growing. Concerns were raised over safety of storing such a great amount of explosive materials, but no action was taken.
Yeah. Big boom could happen.
In 1664, an iconic new armories building was constructed in the empty space previously used as a garden. The new armories is the oldest surviving Office of Ordnance storehouse in the country and represents a unique architectural style of the late 1600s. It has survived to this day, currently housing the Castle Cafe.
I think I remember this. I'm trying to picture it. I just remember it. I think I've seen this stuff. Different shade of. Is it still red? It is still red. The Great Fire of London, 1666. Okay. How does this affect power?
In 1666, a devastating fire swept through London, destroying 13,200 houses, 87 parish churches, the Royal Exchange, Guildhall, and St Paul's Cathedral. In the event, the tower was undamaged, but had the flames reached the White Tower and its vast stocks of gunpowder, the resulting explosion would have rendered demolition beyond all expression for several miles. To isolate the castle from future danger, a safety corridor was created around the White Tower. As a result, between 1670 and 1676, most buildings of the innermost ward were demolished, including the medieval Cold Harbour Gate and the Old Fore building.
Double maps.
The medieval bulwark was dismantled in 1670. The Lion Tower was also refurbished so that visitors could see more of the animals prowling around their circular yard. In 1684, a retaining wall was built to prevent silting of the castle's moat. The tower's military capability was a major cause for concerns, and in a final attempt to improve it, the towers were raised and some 140 cannons mounted on them.
They're ready. What are they thinking? Like a naval brigade coming in?
A futile attempt at bolstering the tower's defence, as the castle walls were too weak to stand against artillery fire and would not last for 24 hours for a modern-day army prepared for a siege. In 1688, when the Master General of Ordnance was advised of the crazy condition of the 16th century storehouse, it was decided to replace it with a single new structure.
Whoa. Oh, I remember that.
Completed in 1692, the new building was of considerable architectural pretension.
That's cool. Okay, now we're in the 18th century. London's growing. Chapel's going to be rebuilt just like it is today.
The 18th century was a period of rapid growth for the City of London. The population exploded with early signs of the Industrial Revolution. London's growth was at the centre of the evolving British Empire.
There's the tower on the right. No Tower Bridge yet. That comes later.
In a contrast to the massive expansion of the City of London, the early years of the 18th century at the Tower were relatively quiet. Smaller scale renovations took place, such as enlarging medieval openings and installing modern windows and doorways with ornamental arches. The artillery platforms from the previous century were also dismantled. The Tower yet again lost its prominence as the greatest arsenal in the country. Other places were better positioned to supply the operations of the expanding overseas empire.
Okay. I wish you would tell us, like, what are, if you guys know, let me know, what are the more prominent arsenals?
However, the Tower was still headquartering the Board of Ordnance, therefore the need for office accommodation grew quickly. The most prominent lodgings from this era was a pair of houses in the northeastern corner of the Inner Ward, and the so-called Old Hospital block built between 1701 and 1719.
Really cool.
The only other surviving ordnance lodging is the house built in 1735, overlooking Tower Green, now the official residence of the Tower Doctor.
The Tower Doctor? Like a doctor or like an architectural doctor?
The largest operation undertaken in the 18th century was construction of the ordnance offices in the Palace Ward. The clearance included dismantling dilapidated Lanthorn Tower and other medieval structures. The new office was built in neoclassical style, expanded multiple times over the coming years. Additionally, a new gateway was created to the east end, giving access to the wharf. The 19th century marked an increased interest in England's medieval past. One of the effects was the emergence of the Gothic revival style.
Of course, we're going to be in the Victorian era for most of this.
In the Tower's architecture, this was manifested when the Newhall's Armoury was built against the south face of the White Tower in 1825. By 1834, the Royal Menagerie had been relocated to the newly created London Zoo, and the Lion's Tower was demolished soon after.
Very interesting.
In 1841, the inhabitants had suffered a number of deaths and hospitalizations due to poor water supply. The decision had been made to convert the moat into a dry ditch in the attempt to improve the sanitary conditions.
Was it cholera?
By 1845, most of the drainage and infilling work had been complete.
I didn't know about this. And imagine if he had all that artillery. Like I don't know if it was gunpowder or explosives. That would be a big boom.
After the Grand Storehouse burnt down in 1841, work had begun on the building of a vast new barracks for 1,000 men. Named the Waterloo Barracks after the Duke of Wellington's greatest victory, this new building espouses a castellated Gothic style.
I just noticed it said Waterloo Barracks, so yeah. The British, I tell you, they love renaming things after famous battles. The Trafalgar Square, the Waterloo Barracks.
Today, it is a home to the Jewel House.
Yeah.
In addition to the Waterloo Barracks, the Royal Engineers provided separate officers' quarters.
I sat on those steps and ate and drank something. I remember that's where I had my snack.
Now the Royal Fusilier Museum, to the northeast, very much in the same style.
Because when you enter that the middle part right there, the barracks to the jewel tower, or to the jewels, and then you exit, kind of you see on the right hand side of that the barracks where there's a little corridor. That's where you exit that way. Beautiful photograph. Only 150 years ago, right here.
A new main guard was created out of the storehouse erected in 17th century to the north of the Wakefield Tower. The year 1846 also saw demolition of various private houses and storage spaces.
Wow. Not going away. Modernizing everything.
In 1851, a dedicated ticket office was created by the entrance. The tower has been a visitor attraction since the 18th century, but numbers of tourists increased dramatically in the 1800s.
I didn't know it was that long ago that they did tourism for this. You know, when I think of tourism as such as a like a modern thing, a 21st century thing, 20th century thing. But 150 years ago plus, here we are.
Visitors were fascinated by the stories of England's turbulent and sometimes gruesome history.
And yeah, and to them, you know, it's been 300, almost, it's 250 years since, 225 years, somewhere like that, since the death of King Henry VIII. So, actually, 300 years.
The increasing obsession for a neo-Gothic architectural style led to the tower's greatest transformation since the 13th century. Most of the modern additions that concealed the medieval fabric were demolished, and large parts of the castle given the new medieval look, for better or for worse, and the appearance they retain today.
Keeping up with the times.
The authorities saw that the ramparts were cleared and modified for modern weapons. Some portions of the walls were restored to the medieval look, while others were not, probably due to the availability of funding over the years.
Here to stay. Island in the background.
Subsequently, construction of shell-proof casemates began against the outer ward walls, and in 1856 a new northern bastion was built midway between Legs Mount and Brass Mount to fill the gap in tower defences.
They're still thinking about tower defenses in 1856. It's wild to me. After all the efforts they've done to take things away for that reason.
The end of the 19th century saw more clearance of buildings underway.
Wow.
Between 1879 and 1885, the Horse Armoury, the Eastern Annex and the Ordnance Office were demolished. The front of the tower was exposed and a new entrance created. Lanthorn Tower was reconstructed as well.
Wow. A whole new look. All
By
here we go.
1900s, the Tower of London had reached its final appearance and remained mostly unchanged to this day. The year 1894 marks the completion of the Tower Bridge.
See how close it is? So you can do a combo right there pretty easily.
It is a distinct landmark that complements and provides iconic background to the Tower of London. In the 20th and 21st centuries, tourism had been the Tower's primary role, with the remaining routine military activities. A detachment of the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers still mounts a guard at the Tower, and with the Yeoman Warders, takes part in the ceremony of keys each day. On several occasions through the year, gun salutes are fired from the Tower. Although only one bomb fell on the Tower of London in the First World War, it landed harmlessly in the moat. The Second World War left a greater mark. On the 23rd of September 1940, during the Blitz, high explosive bombs damaged the castle, destroying several buildings and narrowly missing the White Tower.
Jeez.
Northern Bastion and the guardhouse were never rebuilt.
Wow.
After the war, the Tower of London was reopened to the public. Since 1990, the Tower of London has been cared for by an independent charity, Historic Royal Palaces, which receives no funding from the government or the Crown. In 1988, the Tower of London was added to the UNESCO list of World Heritage Sites,
Really cool.
in recognition of its global importance and to help conserve and protect the site.
We got to look up all those UNESCO places.
However, recent developments, such as the construction of skyscrapers nearby, have pushed the tower towards being added to the United Nations Heritage in Danger list.
They're never going to get rid of this area, though. Like, that would be a tourism like nightmare for their tax dollars. They would never get rid of it. And the history and the prominence of it, this is London, right? The Tower of London. Besides Elizabeth Tower, I mean, you can make your arguments, but I don't think there's a more iconic place of London, Tower of London. It's where it started. Technically.
Thank you for watching the.
And one thing I want to make note of is he didn't mention the ravens. There are ravens that are there's a raven yard near the entrance of the White Tower. So you can actually see, so if you've never seen ravens, you can see ravens just frolicking out in the grass. The thing is, yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Please let me know what you thought of the tower. It's such an interesting experience to go, and it covers, 1,000 years of history, really about 600 years of history, about 400 years of upkeep, but from 1066 to the Norman conquest, to seeing like the actual, you could see the actual the bricks and the original flooring, to Henry the Seventh and Henry the Eighth, their additions, as well as Edward and so forth. Before then, there was just so many different pieces of history there, and the crown jewels are there too, ceremonially. So like, if you are ever in London, you've never been, highly encourage you to go to see it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Leave a video recommendation down below. Subscribe. I'll see you guys next time. Peace out. Bye-bye.